Hey guys! So, we're here again, on to the second episode of this series thing. Last time I covered more or less the main characters, so this time I'm going over my side characters. Or at least, some of them. As I've mentioned in my previous video, I don't really have a specific protagonist, so even though I use terms like main characters and side characters, in reality they're all kinda their own thing. They all have like their own little stories and stuff going on. It's a slice of life series, what do you expect? I just use those terms because I tend to focus more on some than others, though there were times I focused more on these characters than the quote-unquote main characters. Again, I don't really treat this series all that seriously. I just kind of do what I do, and if I want to focus on an unimportant character, I will. So I mentioned that my side characters contain some of my favorites. Though I love my main characters with all my heart, I just have a wee bit more fun with these. I don't know, maybe it's because they're more goofy and thus I can do more jokes with them. Or they're more, quirky or something. Beats me. Anyways, enough of that. On to these boys. Alright, first one up is Jake and Jamie. I said both of them because honestly, they are a matched set. I can't really talk or show or anything with one without having the other. They always do things together, and they even live together. If it isn't obvious, yeah, they're a thing. It's funny too, cause I wasn't even intending that. They were just goofy characters, but one day I drew them in the same panel, and then I did it again, and then I just kept doing that. After that, they just started doing things together and became best friends, and the next thing I knew, I started shipping them, and yeah, it wasn't intentional, it just kinda happened. Anyway, Jake. He isn't really all that much by himself, he really is there to bounce off of Jamie. He's the happy-go-lucky goofy one, and also is the one who openly shows his adoration, I guess. He's a scientist who specializes in human experimentation. You know, testing new drugs, looking at brainwaves, examining human behaviors, and solving problems during certain situations. Fun stuff. In this lab, each scientist gets to have their own couple test subjects, and guess who Jake got? None other than our boy, AJ. One thing about Jake is that he loves his job, especially the experimentation part. Let's just say he gets a kick out of doing them, to the point that it makes him go a little crazy, all to AJ's dismay. Because of this, he's the most proficient at his job, but is also the most concerning. All of the other scientists have to keep him in check, and if the government wasn't there to enforce regulations, there's no saying what he'll do in the name of science. So, mad scientist, basically. Then there is Jamie. So, he's a tsundere. He acts rather bitter and mean towards a lot of people, Jake included, but he's actually really soft and caring. Jake knows this and tries to make him show off his softer side a bit more, but Jamie's all like, dude, stop, I'm not gonna do that. Baka. He's a much more serious and responsible person than Jake is, but he'll always go to him to vent about his problems about the day and whatnot. As for work, Jamie is a doctor and works at a hospital. He likes his job, but he doesn't like the stupid people who don't take his advice seriously. Design-wise, he was originally gonna have an affinity for hats, and he probably still does, but I just kinda dropped that. I don't know why. His skin color was another thing that also just kinda happened. Originally, he was gonna have AJ's skin tone, but one time I experimented, like, with darker colors, and it just kinda stuck. When I did that, I suddenly had the idea of making him, I don't know, like Indian or something. So he is, with the name Jamie. Moving on, we have the edgelord himself, Jax. His full name is Jackson, but everyone just calls him Jax. So my boy went through what I think is the most changes design-wise since I first created him. Same goes for his name. I would legit rename him every single comic, because I couldn't pick one. And his, like, design, you do not want to see his original design, trust me. So, he's an internet celebrity known as the edgelord, and as expected, he has a lot of internet notoriety. A bunch of YouTubers make commentary videos about how cringy he is and stuff, and he knows this, fully. As you can hopefully tell, that whole edgy thing is just an act. In reality, he's actually a really fun-loving, happy-go-lucky, kinda pathetic guy, and a massive weeb. He's also a huge fanboy who reads, like, fan fiction and looks at fan art and probably has, like, a bunch of waifus. In my previous video, I talked about how Wendy wrote a fan fiction about him, and they met, and they found out they were weebs, and they started dating. After that, he moved to their town, and he now lives in one of those, like, one-room apartments. You know, the ones where these apartments are basically hotel rooms, those. However, because of his internet status, Jax gets a lot of hate online. He tries to ignore it, but it gets to him as, you know, on the internet, he's not allowed to break character, so that sucks. I thought that what happened was that as a teen, he probably made like a bunch of posts joking about like edgy and goth people and stuff, and then like an agency probably reached out to him. For this reason, he kind of regrets the whole thing, and he actually kind of hates his job. On the other hand, it does give him good pay, and, you know, he found his girlfriend, so, yeah. As for his design, it was originally gonna be more, I don't know what the term is, goth, punk, I don't know, something like that, with more spikes and belt buckles and blood on his fingertips. But when you draw them over and over and over in the middle of class, you kind of want to draw him more quickly, so I opted for something much simpler. I also think it just fits him more. Like, Jax doesn't like wearing stuff like that. He's forced to because of, like, sponsors. He'd rather wear his geeky Opie anime shirt instead. As for the other stuff and the blood in his fingertips, I thought that was so goofy that it is part of his design, but I cannot imagine him wearing that on a daily basis. So he only wears it when he's working. Here's an example. When he isn't wearing any of that, he just wears something like this at home. Oh, and very important, his red eyes. Yeah, those eyes aren't actually red, they're contacts. No, instead he just has normal brown eyes, cause it's a natural eye color that isn't used enough. And finally, we have the wild child himself, Jay. Out of all the characters, he is straight up one of my favorites. Period. You might recognize him as the main guy from the Eurus animation I did a while back. Anyway, Jay. His full name is Jaybird, but everyone just calls him Jay. He's also the most, different out of all my characters. Okay, I'll explain. So, he lived his entire life in the wild, out in the woods and mountains, raised by nature, or whatever, hunting animals and barely surviving and stuff. One day, Coloratura finds him while she's trekking the woods, and she kind of sort of takes him in. After that, he lives at the palace as they try to assimilate him to society. He even becomes like a butler's apprentice and all that. So, basically, he's Tarzan, or Mowgli, except he actually wears clothes. So, the origins of Jay are a mystery, and that's kind of the point, the fact that you don't know. No one knows where he came from, or who he really is, or who his relatives are, or even his real name, if he even had one to begin with. FYI, he named himself Jaybird. No one really knows his true age either. Because he lived his whole life in the wild, he's pretty much what you'd expect. Really weird and has like no idea what social cues are. He bites and scratches, has extremely good hearing, and also has a really numb sense of touch, high pain tolerance, and is on guard literally all the time because he's lived a life that anything can kill him. For that, it takes him a good while to get comfortable around a person. He's the most comfortable around Coloratura and does pretty much everything she says without question. To put it simply, Jay is like a dog, or a really young child. He's a wild boy, what do you expect? Again, because he's lived without people for so long, emotionally, he's stunted. Most of the time, he has no expression at all, even when he's doing something like hunting or skinning an animal or killing people. For that reason, many people just kind of think he's emotionless, but he isn't. Though he doesn't show it often, if something is of interest to him, like food, he'll emote quite easily. You can kind of see that in the Eurus animation as well. Obviously, he's a really good hunter and killer, and has an old knife and a makeshift bow. Sweet. Design-wise, when I first showed him to people, many of them thought it was Link, and I was like, no, he's not. He wasn't originally like that either. Before, his design was more generic, I guess. But then Breath of the Wild came out and everyone started freaking out over Wild Link, so like, I had to. Also, yes, the heterochromia and freckles were necessary. And that's more or less it for this video. I was going to add more, but this video is getting long enough as it is. I'm not done with the side characters yet. I still have like another batch to get to. One thing I'm sure you'll notice quickly is that everyone in this batch starts with a J. And just like literally everything else, this was also unintentional. I just started noticing that I started naming a whole bunch of characters with the letter J, especially when I named Jax. He's the last one out of these to be named, like fully, like with the name that stuck. And I was like, what the heck? Why do I keep naming these people with the same letter? But yeah, I hope you liked this, and like the last video, you can go back to my older stuff and have a little more of an understanding of what's going on. Stay tuned for part 3.